So welcome. My name is Amber. I am an adult and child interaction strategist, educator, and coach. I help parents and teachers to improve their interactions with children so that we can create more confident, capable, and emotionally intelligent children in our homes, schools, and communities. And I do that through teaching targeted strategy and targeted awareness and strategy. So today we're going to be talking about stigma. This is a topic that I think is very, very important. We say a lot in the African American community, and because it really is, there is a stigma around needing help for behavior and mental health. But the reality is that a parent is a parent in most cases. So the stigma that parents feel, number one, around needing help for their child can be gut-wrenching, right? We feel these, or we have these expectations of how our children should be or how they should listen, and then when we send them out into the world and they're not exhibiting the behaviors that we think we taught them when they were at home, or we think we're teaching them something and then they start exhibiting something at home that we're like, whoa, what is this? This is not really the path I thought it was going to go down. Then you're faced with having to reach out for help. And I mean, whether that's help from a coach or whether or not that's help from a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a behavioral counselor, there is a feeling that parents get and that parents talk about when they have to go outside or reach outside of themselves for help. And part of what I would like to do is to drop that facade, because whether or not you looking from the outside and you see those parents who seem to have it all together and their kids seem to be perfect, I promise you that whether little or big, they have some of the same issues. It might not be on as large of a scale, but everyone can judge, right, when it's not their kid, or when you're dealing with a kid that's not yours. So we're going to loosen up some of the language around behavior and around anger and around difficult children so that we can create a space to talk about it and to not feel shame around it. So today we're going to be talking about why creating stigma and shame around behaviors makes behaviors worse. This is something I see or saw all the time, and see with teachers and children and parents and children. So we're going to talk about the three main ways that I see that stigma and shame make behaviors worse. So the first way is that it creates doubt. So children who do not feel secure, who are uncertain, will act out more to gain control of their surroundings or control of their environment, or to test boundaries. So, and it is true, would they say that children act out in an environment where they feel most safe? That is true, but they also act out when they have no genuine guidance and are left to their own devices. So when I say genuine guidance, I mean, so you guys hear me talk a lot about it all starts with communication and being able, and your child being able to talk to you, or as a teacher, your students being able to talk to you. It all starts from that level of communication. So if they don't feel like they have genuine guidance, I did a live or I did a video before where I talked about always wanting something from a kid as opposed to wanting to connect, and that's it. So if children feel like you're always wanting something from them, you're always wanting them to be perfect, for their behaviors to be perfect, then they will act out to try to gain control, to try to show you that you can't control them because you're always trying to get something from them, and they'll buck against that in order to feel secure and in order to feel self-assured. So placing shame and doubt around undesirable behaviors without proper instruction or guidance creates an environment where they are not only unsure about how others perceive them, but they also become unsure about how they perceive themselves. They become unsure about themselves. They become insecure, which we know insecurity leads to deeper behavioral issues, but also it can lead to an outlash of behaviors, anger, rage. So that's that. Number 2, when we create a stigma and shame around behaviors, interactions between adults and children become hyper focused on negative instead of positive, and they become artificial. So we go back to where you're always trying to get something. It feels like to a child that you're trying to change them, right? Because in some cases, really the child just can't help themselves. And so this is kind of what we see with the stigma, right? We see, well, your child or my child or your child as a teacher shouldn't be behaving like that. You just need to put your foot down and tell them, right? You're the adult, they're the child, they need to listen, this is how they need to be behaving. Which, listen, I'm a product of tough love. I am no, I'm no stranger to it. And in general, I agree with the theory of tough love where it belongs, right? In its proper place. However, absent of connection with the child, then placing tough love above everything else when a child may need something else besides tough love is ineffective. So tough love doesn't fix everything, right? You can't just tell every kid to buck up and suck it up and, get over it. That doesn't work for every child in every moment. And it may work for a child today and it may not work for a child tomorrow. And you know this as an adult, right? What I'm feeling today might not be what I'm feeling tomorrow. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in, being able to move with the fluidity of emotions without having it completely affect our productivity throughout the day. And that's what we want to get to with children, helping them to be able to understand what's going on in their bodies, what's going on in their minds, and then not letting it affect the productivity of their day, knowing when they need to take a step back. But that starts with having guidance from an adult. So now that the precedent has been set for shame and doubt, each interaction is dripping in fear and uncertainty. And yes, I say fear, and I talk a lot about fear. But then when you become engaged in these interactions with kids, they become fearful to engage with you. And that's not what we're going for. We want to go for open communication, right? And for the good or the bad. So it can be off-putting sometimes when, parents start to work with me and then they in turn start to work with their children and they find, oh, okay, yeah, my kid is opening up to me, or, I'm connecting more with my kid. I'm starting to understand my kid a little more, but then they also get the other side where the child may start to verbally test boundaries because they want to see, okay, well, I can talk to her about this. Can I talk to her about anything, or can I say this to her? And that's when parents start to freak out a little bit because they're like, wait a minute, like they start to go back to wait a minute, I'm the parent, you're the child, which is fine. But as long as we do that in a way that's guiding, so that they don't, because a lot of times really if you step outside of yourself and you are really paying attention to the cues that a child is giving you, you can tell when a child is saying something out of pure disrespect, like when they're saying it out of disrespect, or when they're just saying it like, okay, like, is this something I can say, or just purely out of innocence. So we have to be able to distinguish, and that starts with knowing our kids and getting to know them and getting to know their cues, and understanding social cues. So each interaction is dripping in fear and uncertainty, and then they start expecting punishment instead of reinforcement. So I'm going to pause here to explain a little bit the difference between punishment and reinforcement, because we tend to misunderstand reinforcement. So Okay. Sorry. It's really yummy. Okay, so punishment versus reinforcement. So reinforcement is, okay, so the easiest way to explain it is, so let's just say you have an employee. Let's just say you, at your job, there's an employee who is engaging in a behavior that's undesirable. Reinforcement is adding or taking away something from the environment in order to reach a desired outcome from the other person, right? So positive reinforcement is an employee is doing something undesirable and the manager adds praise to the environment. So they see the employee do a desired behavior that they were not doing before, and a manager will add praise to the environment to reinforce that positive behavior that they saw, right? That's positive reinforcement. Now, negative reinforcement is what we tend to get confused with punishment. Negative reinforcement is not punishment. Negative reinforcement is the removal of something from an environment in order to get a desired outcome. So take that same employee who is engaging in undesirable behavior, okay? The manager has a conversation about the behavior, and then they engage in the positive behavior. So they engage in a desired behavior desired by the manager. The manager then takes away something from the environment to reinforce that positive behavior. So the employee engages in the correction, engages in the positive behavior, and then the manager will take away the nagging, the 50 emails a day that tells them to get that thing done or to change that thing. They take away something from the environment to reinforce the positive behavior. So you don't do this, so you do this, I don't do this anymore. That's negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is you do this, I add something to the environment, a bonus, praise, you name it. So positive reinforcement, adding something to the environment. Negative reinforcement, taking something out of the environment to reinforce a positive behavior. Now, what we usually think of when we say negative reinforcement, which it is not, is punishment. Punishment is undesirable behavior, undesirable consequence. Negative behavior, negative consequence. That's punishment. Okay, so we tend to use the two interchangeably, but it is not the same. Okay, so I want to be clear on that so that you can understand when I say they start expecting punishment instead of reinforcement, whether that reinforcement is positive or negative, right? Whether you remove something from the environment or add something to the environment to reinforce a positive behavior, they don't expect that. They expect punishment. They expect negative, 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 right? And then in turn, you are reinforcing the negative behavior, if that makes sense. So, and that was my next point. So the child begins to expect correction instead of praise, or in some cases, punishment begins to reinforce the negative behavior. We're training them to expect punishment instead of communication, instead of guidance for their behavior. I hope that's making sense to you. That's the opposite of what we're going for, okay? We want our interactions to be dripping in guidance and love, and not to be dripping in fear and punishment. So the last thing, the last reason why stigma and shame causes behavior to intensify and not to dissipate is because it starts an internal cycle of blame, which can exacerbate behaviors out of guilt or create new emotional issues. So when you start to shame people about a behavior that they honestly probably already feel bad about, then they start internalizing that, and they start placing constant blame on themselves. They're thinking, why can't I get this right? Why? And it's this. And one of the things that used to just crush me on the inside is when you would hear kids saying to you, I just don't understand why they don't think I'm trying. Like I'm trying the best that I can. And these are kids who are labeled, ADHD, who, have constant outbursts, who have anger management problems, who, are seen as the worst of the worst. But they have this internal cycle going on inside of themselves that is blaming themselves for not being able to do something that they genuinely need help and guidance to do. And then that shame, since they feel shameful about those behaviors, since they're being shamed about it, they don't want to ask for help because they're like, this is something that is not normal about me. I'm different. And they don't understand that it is okay to be different because they're placed in a system where that difference is highlighted, criticized constantly, and punished constantly, right? So I don't know about you, but I don't want my children feeling like that. I don't want my children feeling like they are to blame now. And let me just say there's a difference between blame and accountability. We want our child to be able to recognize and take accountability for their behaviors, but we don't want that internal cycle of shame and self-blame just going and cycling and cycling and cycling, because the information that they're getting from the outside is telling them that they are less than because they can't do what another child seems easily able to do. So I hope that this is helpful for you guys. I hope that when you listen to these words that you evaluate where you are in your journey with the kids in your life. I hope that it will inspire you to have some real conversations with your kids, whether they're 4, 14, or 18, to really open up the lines of communication with the children that are in your life. Because if you open up those lines of communication and get them to talking about what it is that they're really feeling about their behaviors, I mean, it's a good place to start. So make sure that you like and share this video with those who you think could find the information useful. And also, I just want to say kudos to you parents who are dealing with difficult children. Kudos to you. However much you feel like you are not doing a good job at it, however much you feel like, you're failing at it, or that your children are getting worse, it may seem like that. Man, my heart goes out to you. Lots of hugs from here. If you want to set up a strategy session, you can. And I hope to see you next time. You can always DM me, send a message on the live if you are watching the replay, and I will see you guys next time. If you have any questions, let me know. Be well, guys.